watching this game, what are some of the mistakes that you see yourself doing, or have you seen any thus far?
I wasn't completely efficient in dealing with the Reaper early on. I chased him off creep a little bit too much. I actually almost lost my queen, so that was a bit sloppy. My queen, my larva injects haven't been perfect. I'd have been better trying to surround the tank. Overall, given the way the strategy I played, it's been pretty good. It is a little bit risky doing that Baneling build just because if he had the thick wall up, then I would have invested a lot of resources for nothing. So I don't know if I particularly like that decision. I don't think I would make it in a more important game. But given the strategy I played, it's been pretty clean so far.
And kind of just breaking down the basics for Zerg users, you mentioned the fact that your larva injection could have been a little bit better. Do you have a specific hotkey setup or anything like that for using your queens? What is your general kind of APM spam through to check the queen energy for those larva injections?
Yeah, I put all of my hatcheries on 4, and then I just have queens on 5, 6, 7, 8, and just double-click the queen, and then hit V and click on the hatchery to do the injects. And as for spam, it's just going through that and checking to see if they have energy yet. Hit 5 and see if it has 25.
And in terms of creep tumors, there's a Spire going down just to keep up with your tech path as well as Baneling speed. Looks like Sim's about to finish 4th. This is Jimmy as well as a couple more tanks and just continuing to bolster up his army. Engineering Bay going down right now. I'm not sure if he's seen your... Yeah, he actually has no idea what tech path you're going right now. He's probably just playing the blind and thinking, well, it's Scrap Station. Mutas are probably coming my way. But going back to some of the... Well, go ahead.
Mutas are almost always a good bet on here. It's just the air positions are so close, and mobility is so important for defending on the ground. If they drop your main and hit the gold at the same time, you really need the mobility Mutas give you to deal with that. So, like 99% of CVTs on here are going to be Mutas.
Now, there's another hatchery going down. Do you tend to throw down 3 hatcheries around this time when you're still on 2 base?
If I've been able to get a full 2-base drone count, especially if I can do it before Mutas, then yeah, I'll almost always get an extra hatchery in my main. It's just, if you have a full 2-base economy, that supports more than 2 hatcheries. You just can't use your resources efficiently off that few hatcheries. So it's always good to get that extra hatchery if you have your economy up.
And well, go ahead.
Especially when you're playing Mutiling Baneling, and so a big chunk of your army is Lings and Banelings, which eat up larvae quicker than they do resources.
And really, one last thing to touch on is kind of one of the basics that Zerg users tend to have some problems with: creep tumors. Generally, when do you throw down your first creep tumor, and what is kind of your method in terms of keeping up with it constantly being spread across the map?
If I went hatchery first, then I'll make my first tumor with my first 25 mana out of the first queen, just because you can't support that many larvae early on anyway. And if I went pool first, then I get it with the second 25 mana from my initial queen. And then I just spread it constantly all game. Normally I'll add a second tumor just somewhere later on in the early game when I feel it's possible. And I'll always have at least 2 tumors going in opposite directions. And queen before I really need it, just to lay extra tumors and really have a good creep spread. That's actually one of the biggest problems I have with Korean Zerg play, is they don't focus on creep nearly enough. It's ridiculously important. It has to be one of Zerg's first priorities whenever they're playing.
Now you're going to be taking down these destructible rocks. You have had map control pretty much this entire time. You know exactly what your opponent's up to. You've kept him contained on these 2 bases, and he's just continuing to build up a ton of Marines and a ton of tanks. Looking at your opponent and playing against your opponent, obviously, in this game, really, what do you think Terran should be focusing on in this matchup?
Well, the style he's playing is not bad. This is actually pretty much what MVP did versus Nesty today in the Shakuras and Jungle Basin games. Even if you don't really build up a solid economy behind it, the 2-base Marine tank medevac push is just so incredibly strong that is pretty good anyway. It's just a really, really powerful, efficient unit mix. And this isn't the most reliable side of play. It's a pretty easy way to kill a Zerg, but if they break your attack, then the game's over. You're putting everything into that one basket. I think a better way to play is to take a quicker 3rd base, get a couple of Thors, and just play really, really defensively, until you have that huge tank Thor ball with enough Marine support to stop Mutas from magic boxing you. And really, I think that should be Terran's goal in any game where they're not terribly outclassed.
Looks like we're about to see a huge fight here. A nice scan taking out all of your forward creep and pulling back just a little bit, leaving the tanks at the front. And here you come charging with all of your Lings, Banelings, and Mutas. And looks like I thought you were going to crush that fight. There go the Banelings going boom onto those onto those Marines. Your Mutas are going to fall back though. I see a lot of Zerg players sometimes being hesitant and not knowing when to exactly throw their Mutas into a group of Marines. What is kind of your general rule of thumb for that?
If you absolutely know you're going to crush it, like you lose 2 or 3 Mutas, or like 5% of your Mutas, then it's okay to engage. But if you ever think it's going to be close at all, don't do it. 99% of the time, Terran will win the fight if it doesn't seem like a clear victory for you. Marines, it's just like there's a breaking point there where the medevacs kick in and overpower the Mutas' DPS, and then it goes downhill really quickly from there. So usually you do not want to engage without Banelings.
And the other thing I see a lot of Zerg players sometimes struggling with is once Terran users get set up and have their tanks kind of situated to where they're spread out, but not spread out so much that Lings can't come in or Mutas can't come in and pick them off. Once they get situated, what do you try to do? I see a lot of players always sitting in their Mutalisk and attacking kind of their rally points, the Terran's rally points to take off Marines. Is there anything else other than that, or is that pretty much all you focus on?
Just hitting any stray target with Mutas is all you can really do at that point. What's good on most maps is building up a lot of extra Banelings and trying to flank them any way you can at the army, because that makes it much, much harder to avoid with Marines. Moon's play is actually a really good example of this. There's a lot of flaws in his play, but one thing he does really, really well is just his army movement and making sure he's always flanking with Banelings. So that's something I've been trying to incorporate in my play a lot more recently. Is something good to focus on versus.
Now looking at the the resource tab, 162 for you, 120 for Jimmy. He's still been on 2 base this entire time, almost mined out there in his main, and it looks like you're going to advance forward here, trying to take out these destructible rocks here. I thought you might go to try to snipe a tank, and Jimmy's going to move up and attack a bunch of your Lings with his Marines, making you fall back. You're going over to his natural and taking out a ton of SCVs. I believe there's only 1 missile turret there, and without these destructible rocks down, there's really nothing Jimmy can do. He's actually just going to move forward here. He's probably feeling a little bit under the weather here right now after that last attack, and you're going to get an easily nice surround there. He's not even going to try to micro those Marines, and that's most assuredly going to be the win for you. But in terms of, I'm going to kind of play devil's advocate. Looking at the U.S. server, who would you say are the top 3 Terran right now, if you could speak about it?
Honestly, I don't have enough experience. I play very few games on the American server. I suppose Phoenix, QXC, and I don't know. What are the other big name Terrans?
You said Phoenix, QXC. Let's see who else we got there. I'm trying to think. First person that comes to mind is General, but he doesn't obviously play over here because he's been in Korea. I really can't think of anyone right now. I'm kind of having a brain dead moment.
Yeah, I suppose it should be LZ Gamer, out of team pride and stuff.
Well, I'm glad to see that you and LZ have become friends after all that bullshit drama that popped up on Team Liquid between the two of you. But
that was always overblown. Like, we were in media together in StarCraft 1. It's not animosity. It's just like people don't know how to take a joke.
Oh, there we go. Now
the public doesn't know how to take a joke.
The chat is throwing names at me. I just should have known these right off the bat. Players like Drewby. What are your thoughts on Drewby?
I find it hard to consider him good because he was like Canada B 2 vs 2 team in StarCraft 1, and the thought of him now being an international player just sits wrong with me. I guess he's okay.
What about someone like Paynuser, who's done pretty well for himself here on stateside, but really hasn't had any presence in Europe or in Korea?
Actually, yeah, that's another good name. He's done really well at a lot of lands, and that's something you don't see because, as far as I know, he wasn't really a competitive player in anything before this, and he just shows up at lands and plays pretty much at his potential, which is really, really rare. Like, very few people can deal with land settings that well without experience. So yeah, he's a really solid player. Be interested to see what he does in the future.